when we're really letting fear take over, we don't get to sit and think which is the one that would honor God the most or which is the right one, because they're not necessarily, freezing is not always a sin.
Hey, what's up?
Hello, welcome to the Pantry Podcast. We are back. It was actually 2 weeks because of some website drama.
Ooh.
But shout out to our friend and our listener, Jesse, who totally helped save the day
Yes,
with
thank you.
disk usage space and some
Nothing
hidden
better-
cache.
Nothing better than local community.
I know, like literally we knew exactly who to call when I had no idea what the heck to do. So yes, there was some fear, there was a need of faith, and guess what we're going to be talking about for the next 6 weeks? That is right, 6 weeks.
Whoa.
We are going to be talking about fear and faith and how you're conquering fear in a broken world. And we're going to merge some psychology, some biblical history, some personal experience to help you. If you're dealing with fear, then listen for the next month and a half and you are going to hear a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I think it was kind of interesting as we're going through that dilemma. It was a lot.
It was a lot.
And she does a lot, and she's amazing. And she usually fixes stuff and does it well. And there's this cache that just won't disappear. And I hear the frustration. I hear this just being overwhelmed a little bit, right? Just a little bit. And I just pick the phone straight up, and I'm like,
I'm calling
Jesse, call me and we'll talk. And you know what? He came through, and that's kind of how that story went out. But it's kind of neat that, even in that, there's going to be 4 things that we talk about as we
Yes.
go through this series, right? As we're talking about fight, flight, fawning, and freeze, or fawn, fawning,
Yeah.
and freeze. And I think that sometimes when you're going through these situations,
Yeah.
you feel like, oh, you're mad, you want to fight, right?
Yeah.
And then you're like, I just want to run away from it.
Yeah.
And then there's sometimes where you're just like, I don't know about the fawning. You could help me with that one. But and then
It's
sometimes
the one
you just,
people are normally like, what?
and then and the other one, you just kind of freeze up. I know what it means, but in this application, I'm not sure, but maybe you could put a spin to the fawn and how when failure happens.
Yeah. So in this episode, we're going to kick it off by kind of running through all 4 of those.
Yeah.
You've probably heard fight or flight before because they were the original 2 when talking about fear and psychology and all the lingo. It's like, do you fight or flight? But then they started really looking at that. Someone needed their thesis or something, and so they actually were like, let's think about this deeper. And so more came to the surface. Like, there's actually a 5th one called flop, but we ain't going there this time. We'll do that later.
I did some belly flops back in the day.
Right, but we're doing 4 right now, right? And it's it's fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. And the big thing about each one is it's a type of fear response. And most of the time we hear about them in a negative light, even though if there's a bear, depending on the species of bear, you might need to fight or fly, right? So, there are wise
some
times.
bears freeze.
Or freeze and play dead, right?
And honestly,
There's
fawn,
different.
you're not, because you ain't going to talk
You
that
ain't
bear
gonna
into
snuggle the
nothing.
bear, right? Like, that's the one that won't work in this situation, unless you have like a big dead deer with you, and then by all means throw it down.
Oh, yeah.
Make friends.
Sacrifice.
But yeah, so the idea here is that we're gonna be pulling from all these things so that you can learn how you can walk in these in an unhealthy, ungodly way, but how you can also use these in a wise, God-honoring way, and how to just deal with fear in general. So real quick, make sure, subscribe, comment, like, share this episode with someone else that you know that's dealing with fear so that they can get the ball rolling. But let's go ahead and get started. We'll talk about what each one of them is and do a little tie up at the end. And then starting next week, we're going to go into the next one.
Deep on each one.
Yeah,
I
so
really,
let's
I really
talk-
like it. Yeah.
yeah, about
I'll do fight, right?
Cool.
Fight. It's kind of this thing where you're perceiving a threat directly. Okay. And when your body takes over in that situation, like, okay, I've been there. So it's like, all of a sudden it's like, it's kind of interesting how this works. So I can take it to the war side, and you're like, you don't really want to be angry or aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm naming some traits here. But there is this desire and necessity to defend oneself. Mm-hmm. And when we're talking about fight, that is where we're sitting exactly. We're looking at threats that are coming directly at us, right? Mm-hmm. Characterized, our actions are characterized by aggression, anger, and like I said already, a readiness to defend oneself. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. In the psych, right? Mm-hmm. When you're thinking of the psych, there's probably bigger, better terms for that. But you know me, just the psych, right? It involves this release of adrenaline. Mm. And so your adrenaline kicks up, right? It increases your heart rate. You have muscle tension. I mean, it's just like, I'm telling you, You get done in a situation where fight is involved, you are absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
Everything has been just like, and then you feel this release, and it's like you want to just sleep. Actually, we did. It's kind of interesting in war, right? And battles, right? You go through these things, and all of a sudden, it's like the end of it. Everything's kind of wrapping up. You've done your op. You've been pumped up all day long, and everything's going crazy. And then you just hit this moment. It's like, and you're done. You're absolutely done. But and there's some other aspects to this, and it's kind of cool too. Have you ever seen those movies where it goes into like slow motion, right? And it's like you have this ultra keen alertness, and it's almost like things are moving like, ooh.
Yeah, it's like everything's
It's so
slow,
interesting.
but then
Right.
when you blink, it's like so much happens so quickly.
Right.
But you were processing so many things you might not normally that you're like swearing it took longer than it actually did.
Right. It's crazy. And it probably happens in all kinds of different things. Like,
Yeah.
I know people who talk about car wrecks. It's like, man, it felt like forever before I hit that car. Or, it's like everything was going like, right? But really what's happening is your body is adjusting itself for combat in a way, right?
Yeah.
Now, look, I'm not saying we're out driving our cars in accidents or combat, but that's the same feeling that you would get in that fight scenario.
Yeah. And then there's flight, which the idea there is very similar because adrenaline is still involved. Often when you feel a perceived threat, adrenaline is involved, but sometimes it's firing in a different way. But as far as flight is concerned, you're trying to escape, and there could be many reasons for that. But one of the biggest ones is in that split second, you have decided that you can't fight. Either the cost is too high, or it would be too dangerous, or you just know you'd lose, or there's just something at stake. So you decide instead that running is the best option. Like we said with a bear, there's certain bears, they'll follow you. And other ones, they're like, well, hey, go. Bolt, because you can't fight a grizzly bear. You got to outrun it.
Right.
Which is also probably not going to happen. So it's just like prey. But if it's like a brown black bear, right? Like you're supposed to.
I think grizzlies are supposed to freeze, I think.
Okay.
But I don't know. Everybody
You're
change
supposed
that
to
up all the
play
time.
dead or
Black
run
bears,
for the
black bears, you'll
Yes.
fight.
Yes,
Because
you're
they're
supposed to
coming
fight
after
them.
you. Yeah, and then I think
Yes.
grizzlies, they say you're supposed to like lay still, like
Yeah,
just
pretend
like
you're
you're
dead.
dead, and then they get bored with you.
Yeah, something
and they move
crazy.
on.
Like, yeah.
But I don't know.
We're not bear experts. We
So if
just
you have
love the
something,
Bible.
look,
So
hit us
don't
up.
listen to us about how to deal with a bear. Just know that you don't deal with all bears the same. Okay,
But
that's
if you
what
know
we're
you're
saying.
going into a bear area,
Yeah.
this one I know.
Yeah.
Carry bear mace.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
But in a lot of situations, like especially in school, like you either had the parents that said if someone starts to fight you, you finish the fight, or like if someone hits you, you hit back, or you had the parent that said don't, like, you turn the other cheek / get the heck out of there. Most of us had one of those too, and one of the biggest reasons is when you're 5, it's hard to give you any other hypothetical scenario, so they're trying to simplify it way down. But there is a time, and we're going to get into it in the specific episodes, but there is a time for fight, depending on what type of fight it is. There is a time to fly, like he says, flee from temptation, right? So there is a time to run, and it's not about cowardice, it's about obedience, right? So then after we go to flight, I'm going to do fawn, and then you finish with freeze.
Yeah,
okay?
thank you.
Yeah, going back and forth, I was like, wait, I'm leaving him with fawn? So no. Okay, so fawn is the one that everyone's like, what the heck, that doesn't sound like response. It's like befriending the enemy, and getting on the threat's good side to stay safe. So for example, a very possibly triggering example would be like to befriend your captor, right? Like, okay, I've been held by like a terrorist cell in another country. I am like tied to a chair, and I'm going to be here for who knows how long, who knows if I'm going to get bought back or whatever. Like, let me try to like remind them I'm human and befriend them and prove that I'm useful just to stay alive. So you're trying to like do that, but then it can also show up in your daily life, like if you're in an abusive relationship or just a toxic one. That, I mean, I guess that is still abusive, but it's like you're not being hit around, but like they're using you, right? Or like or if at work there's like someone who you feel is kind of a threat, like they want the same position, or it feels like they're out to get your job or get you fired or something like that. Like you might try to befriend them, make nice with them, make peace with them, or the boss. There's all kinds of situations.
There's some terms that we used to have for that back in the day, and I'm just going to leave those out of this.
Yes, I think that's wise.
But really, I'm going to use one term.
Yeah.
And going back to your captive and group captivity, right?
Yeah.
We call them sellouts. I mean, okay, let's just be
I mean,
real.
in certain situations,
there
yeah,
were certain
yeah.
situations. So when you look through history and you look
Yeah,
through,
yeah,
when you look through, and I don't like bringing all this out, but like Holocaust and Vietnam War and some of these things, you would actually see guys that would go to the other side to get favor while
selling
out
their peers,
people and their peers.
Yeah,
so I'm not trying to sound
that's
like that,
absolutely true, but that's a good example of a
that's
type.
really of the negative type.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No,
just wanted to throw that in
absolutely.
there.
Like, we don't know all of the story about Judas, right? We don't know all of it. We know that Satan tempted and then entered him, and that like all that. We don't know, but he rolled up and said, "Hey, how much can I get for selling out Jesus?" And potentially maybe he felt in danger and was like, I'm gonna get out of here while I still can. This guy's dangerous, right? And but you know, like those kind of sellout situations, like they're common. Tax collectors back then were seen as sellouts to the Israelites because you know you're taxing your own people to be good
old
with the
Zacchaeus
centurions
up in that tree.
Yeah, right. And Matthew, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you know,
huge.
yeah. So fawning
Right.
can either be completely understandable, totally makes sense, or it can be like, no, we don't understand because you sold out people to get safe for yourself, right? So it can, you know, it's one of the other ones. And then finally freeze,
becoming immobile, frozen. I mean, it's a frozen makes sense, right? You put water in the freezer and now you can't slosh it around, right? It's completely immobile. It's characterized by paralysis, numbness, and sometimes disassociation. Huge. So I'm gonna go on this one. Huge in the PTSD realm. Freeze is huge. It's kind of like when neither flight or nor fight, it's kind of like it's a different response. Like same type of scenarios can happen. So in other words, you know, something's coming at you, and fight or flee would be the normal, but you freeze. And so that's like a hypervigilance, where
deer in
it's
headlights
it's like,
almost.
you know, like how you'll be driving down the road and I don't know why deer do it, but they come out, boom, and they stand in front of your car. Sometimes they run across, but I've seen them actually stop, stand, and just be like frozen in your lights. Why in hunting, spotlighting is illegal, right? Right. It's like, because they know what that light does. It freezes them and it makes it an unfair advantage, right? Same difference when we're looking at this. But what's interesting is even in that freeze, it's not like the person is completely, it's almost like they're acutely aware. Like they just know that this is wrong, that something's going on.
It's almost like like information overload.
Right.
Like there's so many scenarios running. It's almost like, you know how AI normally can just spit out a response, but depending on what you ask it, it takes a little time to get the whole response, or it's like thinking. It's that kind of idea where you're running so many scenarios and you have no idea which one is the right one because it seems like there's so many wrong ones, and so you freeze and you don't know what to do.
How about this? Get caught in a lie. David, when his homeboys called him out about Bathsheba and the whole scenario, I could almost imagine that his heart stops, like just, and it's just like that's freezing. Have you ever been caught in a lie? I'm reaching out to y'all, like where you know you're caught. It's like, and you're like, I'm done, I'm finished, and you don't know what to say.
Right.
Freeze.
Exactly.
Freeze.
So those are the four that we're going to be covering over the next couple weeks. We're going to have 1 week for each one. So if you feel like you do all of them, I mean, I really think that depending on the scenario, all people do all of them, but there might be one that you really feel you identify more with. That's the common one. And maybe you see it as a detriment because often when we're really letting fear take over, we don't get to sit and think which is the one that would honor God the most or which is the right one, because they're not necessarily. Freezing is not always a sin. Fleeing is not necessarily a sin. Befriending an enemy is not always a sin. There is a biblical scenario for each of these. But there's also a time when fear is speaking rather than godly wisdom and security, that it is sin because you're acting out of fear and a lack of trust and a lack of faith in God. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So remember to subscribe, tap the notification bell if you are on YouTube. If not, if you're subscribing on something like Apple Podcasts, it'll just come, Spotify, all those things, so that you don't miss the rest of the mini-series, because I really think this one's going to be very pertinent. I don't think anyone isn't struggling with fear on some level, and we're going to maybe make you feel a little bit better, because you're going to learn how to wield these with wisdom instead of with weakness. So, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, I hope you guys are really enjoying this mini-series on faith over fear. Subscribe now so you don't miss the rest of this mini-series where we dive deep into how to deal with fear in a godly way.